anyhow.
I like to watch games like that with singing in the background.
One of the greatest performances in NBA Finals history, a 40-point triple-double on better than 70% shooting, which has only been done like 5 other times in NBA history in the finals, and Wilt Chamberlain has like 3 of them.
Yep.
So a 2-part question here. Do you miss Jimmy Butler in Minnesota? And are you envious? So that's question number 1. And were we wrong about Jimmy Butler? I called him a fake superstar at one point.
Okay. On question 1, yes. No doubt.
You miss him.
Envious? Hell yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is what Tibbs envisioned, right?
A grinder team.
Yeah, just coming in and taking it to teams and not giving a damn. I love it. The second part is a little harder to unpack for me because was I wrong about his abilities? I think I was. I thought he was really good. Did I think that he was good enough to get a triple-double against a LeBron James team in the finals? No, that'd be pushing it by a lot. If you had come to me and said, no, Judd, he's this good, I'd be like, I don't think so. I would have been wrong. But here's my thing. I still can't get past the fact that I don't think the way he went about his business here was the right way to do it. Like, do I love a player like we saw last night, Phil? Yes, obviously. It's great to watch, and he's competitive beyond belief, and his team was basically, they're dead, and he comes back and single-handedly leads them back into a win, and he plays great. That's all fantastic, and you love to watch that as a sports fan. But I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on the fact that I don't think he handled himself here in a way that I get. And here's my last thing. If this had all been based on Wiggins, I'd be like, hell yeah. Yeah, go to it. But do you really look at Cat and say, well, I'm going to lump him in the same way, and he's really weak? And I understand, folks, he's not Butler mentality-wise. I completely get that. But I can't just totally go to the other side of the opinion now and be like, Cat deserved that, and they should have traded Cat. I can't manage to get myself there. And maybe it's a me problem, but I can't do it.
There's so much to unpack here. I'm glad we're unpacking it because this is therapeutic in many ways.
Play the
too.
therapy music if we have it.
Do we have therapy music?
I don't know. I'll see what I can dig up.
What therapy music are you talking about?
Something soothing. Do we have something soothing? I feel like we need something soothing. We're conflicted right now. We're in our own heads.
Like meditation music or something?
Yes, we're in our own heads right now.
So I do miss Jimmy Butler. I do miss the fierce, all-in competitiveness. And I was wrong to call him a fake superstar. My point of contention with Jimmy when he forced his way out of Minnesota was that in his head, he thought he was Kobe Bryant. Like if you were to just, crack open Jimmy's brain and try and get inside of it and see like who does he think he is? He thinks he is LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, but then you look at the productivity and he's really, really good up until this year, but he's not on that level. Like he wasn't going to be the guy that carried a team to a championship like a LeBron or a Kobe, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That was my opinion of Jimmy a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of felt like if he wants to be the man on a team, it'll just be a series of first and second round, maybe conference finals oustings from the NBA playoffs. Well, this is such a different year, and you could maybe argue that in a year in which you had full arenas and like if the Milwaukee Bucks didn't have to pause their season for 3 months, that maybe Jimmy Butler sort of took advantage of a loophole in the system to get to where he's gotten to. But that game last night solidified me being wrong about him as a fake superstar. A fake superstar doesn't, with 2 of their best players out, a fake superstar doesn't go for 40 and a triple-double and shoot 70+% and go at LeBron on basically every play, offensively and defensively. So I was wrong about the fake superstar part. The thing that I think about the most is I loved the idea of Cat and Jimmy Butler as sidekicks. When that trade happened, like the thought of, oh my God, Jimmy Butler finally getting that secondary superstar that's going to be healthy and efficient, and he's going to help him grow. And I fell in love with sort of what's happening in Los Angeles right now. You've got your elite big man who can shoot threes and grab rebounds. And then you've got your elite wing perimeter player, almost a diet version of what the Lakers have with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Like I thought the Timberwolves were going to have that. And it pissed me off the way Jimmy walked in and basically said, wait a second. You guys are like 2 or 3 years away minimum from a maturity standpoint, a roster standpoint. There was a report from Bleacher Report last year from somebody that said Andrew Wiggins, actually it was Bobby Marks, that Wiggins' contract extension and him making $35 million was like the root of Butler's unhappiness and all those things. Like, well, just find a way to get rid of Wiggins. You find a way to mesh with Cat. Be patient for a year or two. Sign an extension and let this thing play out. Yep. And it's like Jimmy came in and said, whoa, this house is not in order. These guys are way too soft and way too young. And rather than be patient and grow with it and help Karl-Anthony Towns, he just said, I want out. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to like wait 45 minutes for my meal to be served. I want my meal right now. And that bothered me because I still think about the idea of Cat and Jimmy Butler. And I think in a different world, in a different universe, or if those guys were, maybe more similar in age and kind of coming up together, what those guys could do. And so I watch what's happening with the Heat and the way that Jimmy has embraced the young guys, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. Like, it's hard to watch that and not look over at Cat and be like, well, wait a second. You're amazing and you're a great player. And they definitely made the right decision to build around you. And by the way, Tom Thibodeau was the wrong coach to try and handle any of this situation. If it was Eric Spoelstra,
which is funny,
it might have worked. But it's hard not to look over at Cat and be like, wait a second. Why didn't this work? Like, we used to blame Jimmy for, 95% of it, but I would shift my blame more toward probably Cat's immaturity and inability to sort of rise to the moment, if you will. Mm-hmm. But there's certain things we're just never going to know the full story on.
Now the thing that we're not talking about that's the most interesting dynamic probably of this entire conversation is twofold. One, Butler doesn't come here without Tibbs here, and Tibbs being here was actually a detriment to everybody, okay? So that's one, which is very odd because no other GM or coach would have acquired Butler from the Bulls. Tibbs got him because Butler was his guy. The second part is, keep in mind, Jimmy goes to the Sixers and the same sort of thing happens, which means that in Miami, the no pun intended here, the climate is perfect for Butler to basically have it his way and run the team to a degree that a player can. And that's partially in part because Spoelstra's there, who's fantastic, and Riley is great as well. So the gamble that you would have had to take with the Wolves if let's say Tibbs had gone to Butler and been like, Jimmy, you're right. These guys, they're not mature. And literally had just said to him, what do you want me to do? Okay. The gamble there is if we had found out about that, you would have literally been putting the franchise in Jimmy's hands completely, including personnel moves. Okay. Phil, to what you're saying about Butler, and you're being wrong now, but at the time it seemed like a correct statement. I don't know if I would have been willing to take that gamble when I have Cat on my team if Jimmy had said, I can't play with him and he's not going to change.
Jimmy also had major injury issues too.
Yes,
throughout his career, some knee problems with the Timberwolves.
But my point is, this is a more complicated discussion than I'm sure some folks saying, well, look at what Butler is doing in Miami. Yeah. If you had just transplanted that back here, we'd be in the fight. So yeah. I think it goes much deeper and is a very, very intricate discussion about one, who's in charge of the team at the time, and two, if you would have been basically given the Timberwolves keys to Butler and said, you decide who stays, you decide who goes. And by the way, if you decide Cat goes, we're okay with that.
Yeah. I think there were a few different issues to parse apart when you go back to the Jimmy and Timberwolves era. Number one, Jimmy Butler reportedly did not like Andrew Wiggins' contract and thought it was a hindrance to building a roster and getting the guys that he wants to come in, right? Well, as we found out, that turned out to be a pretty easy fix. The Timberwolves offloaded Andrew Wiggins, not only his whole contract without having to attach like a first-round pick to it, they got D'Angelo Russell in return.
Yep.
So they got a better player, a flawed but better player in return, and somebody that just has a little bit more, well, I'd say a lot more upside and a little bit more dog in them than Andrew Wiggins had. So that was fixable thing number one that Jimmy was like, I'm out on this. This guy makes $35 million. This is ridiculous. How are we going to get players in here? The other thing, that the Jimmy and Cat relationship, you bring up Jimmy Butler in Miami. I think what Rachel Nichols reported last night from a conversation with Jimmy Butler, I think it's so important to highlight here, in that she reported Eric Spoelstra allows Jimmy Butler more say and listens and implements more things from Jimmy's side than any coach that Jimmy has played for in his career. Rachel reported that and she said directly, Jimmy told me this directly, Eric Spoelstra, what do you think about it? And immediately Spoelstra was like, I don't know if that's true, because he doesn't want to throw Tom Thibodeau under the bus,
right,
or anybody else under the bus.
Absolutely.
But to me, the Heat have created this perfect, credible culture of Godfather Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra with championship ring credibility and ego management credibility. And they have said, Jimmy, some people view you as a pain in the ass. We just love your competitive spirit and fire. There's going to be things where we check you on, like last night. Eric Spoelstra is standing on the sidelines, and he's got to get Jimmy Butler out of the game just to give him a breather, because he knows that Jimmy's going to, Jimmy can't play 48 minutes. He's got to give him a couple minutes of rest here and there. And so he sends a sub in and calls Jimmy back to the bench. Jimmy Butler said, no, I'm not coming out. And Spoelstra said, yes, you are. And Spoelstra wins the argument. So it's this amazing, perfect blend of Jimmy respects the general manager on down to the coach, but also the general manager and the coach respect Jimmy enough to listen to his ideas and some of the things he wants to implement. And then I think the other thing, like the players on the roster that are younger, and this is another report that came out of Philadelphia that sometime in the last few weeks, that Jimmy Butler loved and respected Joel Embiid and his mindset and his dog, right? But not so much Ben Simmons. Similar in Minnesota. I think Jimmy Butler loved Tyus Jones because he had that grit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not so much Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. And so if Jimmy senses that you don't have the same level of go and fire and dog that he does, he can't work with that. And that's what bothered me about the Minnesota thing. It's that if he would have been able to give a little bit more and be a little bit more patient, the Cat Jimmy thing could have played itself out, maybe to a level of being a title contender once we got to this point, like 3 years later. But he never gave it a chance. And honestly, like, he knew that he was 28 years old at the time of sort of the fork in the road.
Right. And
he just made a personal decision and said, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to wait 3 years for Cat to be a mature adult or to be a guy that can grind in a playoff game. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to go find my now. And it wound up taking him 2 stops, and we're watching it in Miami. And it sucks if you're a Timberwolves fan to watch this.
He also needs to be, because I will contend that he remains off his rocker. He also needs to be managed correctly, which means that it helps because Spoelstra's won rings too. But the thing with Tibbs, I feel like Tibbs was Butler's first girlfriend, in the sense that he found a relationship where it was just a continual butting of heads. And it worked because at the time Butler was young, and that's what he liked and knew. And if he got a coach like Hoiberg, he just basically steamrolled said coach, right? But I think by the time the Tibbs got Jimmy here, what Tibbs will not have the ability to do ever is manage people correctly. And I think by the time Butler was 27, 28, he needed to be yelled at, he needed to be pushed, he needed to be pulled. But just as importantly, and this word is going to sound negative, but I don't mean it that way, I think people like Butler need to be manipulated too into believing that they're getting what they want at times. And that might be true and it might not be true, but the perception is the key. And I think by the time Butler got here, it was still, hey, it's Tibbs, just all that crap. Instead of, oh, no, I have to manage you differently, and Kat and Andrew probably, right?
Yeah, there's no nuance with Tibbs.
Yeah, but
touch.
But with Butler, there needs to be, because Butler is basically, in some ways, Tibbs in a jersey.
Yeah.
And so if you just have 2 guys battering rams and all they're doing is clashing, well, when Butler's young, that's fine. When he's not young, that works for a few months, but you don't have what Spoelstra brings, which is, I know exactly what I'm doing, Pat, and we can get this guy to do exactly what we want if he's managed correctly, which in part means acting really hard, like you care a lot about what he has to say.
And if you look at the Heat compared to the Timberwolves in terms of developing young players and getting the most out of them, the Heat are a legendarily great franchise at this. Dwayne Wade's a great example. I mean, they took a guy in Dwayne Wade that Dwayne Wade turned into one of the and he was somewhat hyped and he was a top pick. I get that, but they absolutely peak maxed out Dwayne Wade's capabilities over the course of 15 years. Bam, same thing. Tyler Hero right now, same thing. There's other examples sort of between those bookends. And so I think part of that is it's talent identification, but also part of it is when they get you in, Spoelstra is such a great communicator. Mm-hmm. And I think, and again, this is just speculation, but when you compare the two situations and the different variables you have, you get Jimmy Butler is the common denominator, Miami and Minnesota, right? And then you've got some young, talented players that Jimmy has to coexist with. That's the word I'll use in both. And then you've got the coach and the front office structure. And Miami seems much more adept at saying, all right, listen, Jimmy, I get like Tyler Hero doesn't really play defense yet because he's a rookie. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he's more interested in his Instagram girlfriend over here. But we're working with him. And we're working with him on team ball and defense and all these little nuances. And we need you to just be sort of patient. Don't rag on him so much in practice. Rag on him a little bit. I think there's that mediator factor that you get with a guy like Spoelstra and maybe even with Pat Riley to bridge the two sides.
Yes. In
Minnesota, and this is not speculation, this is factual and reporting. In Minnesota, Tom Thibodeau was gas on a fire. Mm-hmm. All right, we've got a disconnect between the veteran Jimmy Butler and between the young guys in Wiggins and Cat. How do I bridge that disconnect? That thought never went through Tom Thibodeau's head. Tom Thibodeau was more, I'm going to browbeat these young players. I'm going to basically just laugh when Jimmy Butler craps on them in practice and in games and in the media. And I'm just going to sort of hope that I'm just going to give some tough love and sort of hope that these young guys figure it out. I mean, that or trade them like they did with Zach LaVine, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had to trade Zach LaVine to get Jimmy Butler, but my point still stands. Mm-hmm. And so I think a better mediator would have turned this thing in Minnesota into something closer to what you're seeing in Miami. And so I guess if you're dishing out a pie chart of blame for why these things didn't work out, it's probably a third. Tom Thibodeau, young players getting a third for just like not rising to the moment. And then Jimmy Butler getting a third for just not really having any patience and any ability to help bridge that gap. And Jimmy Butler would not apologize at all for his third of pie there. And I think he's happy about it.
This also stems back to the Bleacher Report piece that you were talking about. And the key thing goes back to what? Honest to God, Andrew Wiggins looking Glenn Taylor in the eye and saying, I'll earn that contract.
Well, I'm going to give you $150 million.
If you went back and undid that day with the circumstances that came about with Butler being here and all of that, there is a much better chance. I think Butler's way of expressing it was wrong, but it was very, very clear that he had no respect for anyone in the franchise for the most part. And you know what? With their lack of success, I wouldn't go about it the way that he did, but I'm not shocked by it.
Yep. Boy,
but it's a therapy session. It really is, especially for you, longtime Wolves fan.
I will say, I think
been beat up by the system.
We fast forward about 5 days. I think the Lakers win the title in 5. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be tough to bounce back 48 hours. You're not going to have, your Bam is out still. Like, I just don't think Jimmy's going to be able to duplicate that 3 more times in this series, but he deserves major credit. That was an unbelievable performance.